storm had been running for 11 days when Captain Nora Vasquez stepped off the transport vessel and onto the surface of Veilon for the first time. It hit her before the landing ramp had fully extended. Not the cold, though the cold was extraordinary, a dry, bone-deep freeze that made the air feel like breathing through glass. Not the wind either, though the wind was moving at speeds that made the ground crew lean into it like men walking against a current. What hit Nora first was the color. She saw it the way she always saw things she couldn't explain. A deep, bruised violet pressing against the underside of the cloud layer. Thick, heavy, the texture of something waterlogged and unsqueezed. She stood at the top of the ramp for 3 seconds longer than protocol allowed, her helmet visor fogging slightly at the edges, just staring up at the sky. Vasquez, Sergeant Marcus Akafer's voice came through her earpiece, flat and professional. "You're blocking the ramp." She moved. Veilon was a gray world. That was the first thing every returning soldier said about it in their debriefs, and Nora had read all 47 of those debriefs on the 14-light-year journey here. Gray rock, gray soil, a gray sky that shifted between the color of old iron and the color of a bruise depending on what the atmosphere was doing, which was never anything predictable and never anything gentle. The Karath, the civilization that had built this world, or shaped it, or grown it, depending on which xenologist you asked, had not been seen in direct contact with any human unit in over 3 years. They existed somewhere beneath the surface, in structures that didn't show up on any scan that human technology had yet managed to produce. They had built Veilon to do one thing as far as anyone understood, to record. Every human emotion that had ever been felt on this planet's surface had been absorbed into its atmospheric system. Grief became weather, fear became weather, joy became weather, though none of the 47 debriefs had described anything that sounded like joy. The planet was, in the language of the xenoscience team back on Earth, a living emotional archive, a library of feeling, written in wind and temperature and pressure. The U.S. Deep Space Corps had established forward operating base Crestline on Veilon's northern plateau 8 months ago, for reasons that Nora understood were more political than scientific. Humanity had found a planet that responded to human emotion, and the people in charge of humanity's military expansion had decided that was an asset worth controlling rather than a phenomenon worth understanding. Colonel Richard Denton was waiting at the base perimeter when Nora's unit came through the outer gate. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that had been weathered not by sun, but by sustained intensity. The face of someone who had been making hard decisions for so long that hardness had become his default expression. He looked at Nora the way most senior officers looked at her, briefly, assessingly, and then slightly past her, as if waiting for the more important person behind her to step forward. "Vasquez," he said, reading her name from a tablet without looking up. "Xenolinguist and atmospheric analyst. Your file says you have synesthesia." "Yes, sir." He looked up then, and his expression was exactly what she'd expected. Not curiosity, not interest. The particular blankness of someone who has already filed a piece of information under irrelevant medical footnote and moved on. "Noted," he said, and turned back toward the base. The briefing room inside Fob Crestline was the temperature of a refrigerator and smelled of recycled air and cold metal. 12 soldiers, 4 scientists, and 2 communications officers arranged themselves around a table that was too large for the room. Denton stood at the head of it, and the map projected above the table showed Veilon's northern hemisphere covered in overlapping storm systems that pulsed on the display like something alive. 11 days, Denton said, pointing at the largest storm mass, a churning system that had swallowed the plateau's eastern edge and was moving west. "This system has intensified every day since it formed. Our atmospheric team cannot explain it. Our equipment losses in the eastern quadrant are at 30%. 2 soldiers were evacuated last week with hypothermia severe enough to require medical suspension." He paused. The Karath have not responded to any communication attempt in 9 weeks. Dr. Lian Chow, the base's lead atmospheric scientist, raised her hand halfway. She was small and precise in her movements, and she spoke the way people spoke when they were used to being talked over. The storm patterns don't follow any predictive model we've applied. The energy signatures are anomalous, Denton said, cutting her off with the efficiency of someone who had heard the word many times and found it unsatisfying. Yes, which is why Command has authorized an atmospheric intervention protocol. He let that sit in the room for a moment. Targeted bombardment of the 3 primary storm nuclei using the thermal dispersal array. We stabilize the atmosphere, we restore operational capacity, and we demonstrate to the Karath that we are not willing to simply absorb whatever this planet decides to throw at us. Nora had been quiet since the briefing began. She had been watching the storm display above the table, and she had been feeling something she did not yet have the right words for. The bruised violet she'd seen in the sky when she landed was still with her, sitting at the back of her perception like a sound heard from several rooms away. She recognized it now. She had felt it before in human faces, in the set of a person's jaw, in the particular stillness that came over someone in the moments before they began to cry. She knew what that color meant. The planet was not angry. It was not malfunctioning. The storm system above the eastern plateau, the one that had been intensifying for 11 straight days, was grief. Pure, unprocessed, enormous grief. And it was getting worse. She kept that to herself, for now. Nora had been 7 years old when she first told her mother that sadness was the color of wet concrete, and that happiness smelled faintly of cut wood. Her mother, Dr. Elena Vasquez, had not taken her to a doctor. She had taken out a notebook. Elena Vasquez had spent 20 years studying the intersection of human atmospheric perception and emotional neurology, a field so narrow that most of her colleagues considered it decorative science, the kind of research that got published in journals nobody read and cited in papers about other things. Her central theory, which she had spent her career trying to prove, was that synesthetic perception, the neurological condition that caused some people to experience one sense as another, color as sound, emotion as texture, music as taste, was not a quirk of individual brain wiring but a vestigial survival mechanism. A deeper, older way of reading the world that most humans had evolved out of but not entirely lost. Nora had inherited it completely. Through childhood and adolescence and a military academy that had no framework for what she was describing, Nora had learned to keep her synesthesia contained. Not hidden, it was in her medical file, had been since her intake evaluation, where a base psychologist had noted it carefully and then written no operational impact in the margin. No operational impact. She had spent 14 years in uniform being defined by that margin note. She had joined the Deep Space Corps because her mother had spent the last 3 years of her life studying the early atmospheric reports from Veilon, before the Corps had classified them. Elena had died of a cardiac event 18 months ago, sitting at her desk with an open notebook in front of her. And the last thing she had written in that notebook, in handwriting that got progressively more urgent toward the bottom of the page, was a series of observations about Veilon storm patterns that no one at the Corps had bothered to read, because she had not been a military scientist, and her clearance level had not permitted her access to the full data set. Nora had her mother's notebook. She had read it so many times that she could recite sections of it from memory. The atmospheric responses on Veilon are not random, Elena had written. They are reactive. The question is not what the planet is doing. The question is what we are making it do. Nora had volunteered for the Veilon assignment the week after Elena died. She had been told, politely but firmly, that her profile was not a priority fit. She had submitted a formal request anyway, with a 17-page attached document outlining the potential connection between her synesthetic perception and the Karath's apparent atmospheric communication system. The document had been reviewed by two people. One had written interesting in the comments field. The other had written "See Note Ray, operational impact." She had been assigned to Valen 4 months later, not because anyone had changed their mind about her document, but because the xenolinguist originally scheduled for the mission had broken his leg in a training accident, and Nora was next on the list. Nobody wanted this assignment. The planet was hostile, the Kareth were silent, and the storms were getting worse. Nora had practically run to the transport. In her bunk on the first night at Fob Crestline, she lay on her back and stared at the ceiling and listened to the storm moving over the plateau. Through the base walls she could feel it, not physically, but in the way she felt everything that had emotional weight. A deep, slow, purple pulse, like something enormous trying to exhale and not quite managing it. She thought about her mother's notebook. She thought about the margin note in her file. She thought about Colonel Denton's face when he'd said noted and looked away. She had 8 months of dismissed expertise and a dead woman's research, and a brain that processed emotion as weather. She was, she thought, exactly the right person in exactly the right place. She just had to wait for the moment to say so. The moment came on the morning of her 4th day at Fob Crestline. Denton called an operational briefing at 600, and by 6:10, it was clear that the meeting had not been called to discuss options. It had been called to announce a decision. The thermal dispersal array, 3 satellite-mounted devices capable of delivering focused heat bombardment to targeted atmospheric systems, had been cleared for activation by command. Deployment was scheduled for 900 the following morning. The 3 primary storm nuclei above the eastern plateau would be targeted first, then the secondary system developing to the north. Dr. Chow was asking careful, precise questions that Denton was answering with decreasing patience. Akafer was sitting 2 seats down from Nora with his arms crossed and his face neutral, which Nora had learned in 4 days was his expression for "I have concerns I have not yet decided to voice." The rest of the room was the particular silence of people who had already understood that the decision was made and were now simply waiting for the meeting to end. Nora was watching the storm display. The northern system, the secondary target, had changed overnight. She had noticed it when she walked into the briefing room and looked up at the projection. The color she perceived from it was different from the eastern storm's deep violet grief. This one was sharp, thin and bright and slightly silver at the edges. She knew that color. She had seen it in people sitting in hospital waiting rooms, in soldiers the night before a mission they didn't believe they would come back from. That was fear, and it was coming from inside the base. The thermal dispersal array would not stabilize the atmosphere. It would intensify it, because the atmosphere of Valen was not generating these storms independently. It was absorbing them from the people living on its surface and reflecting them back, amplified. Bombing the storms would be like treating a fever by heating the room. The planet would respond to the aggression of the bombardment with something larger and colder and more violent than anything the eastern plateau had seen yet. She knew this the way she knew the color of grief and the texture of fear. She knew it in the particular, unverifiable, thoroughly documented way that her entire career had taught her to keep to herself. Denton was finishing his summary. Bombardment proceeds at 900 tomorrow. Any final questions? Nora heard her mother's voice in the back of her mind. Not a memory of a specific sentence, just the sound of Elena Vasquez speaking, the particular cadence of a woman who had spent a lifetime saying things people weren't ready to hear and saying them anyway. "The planet isn't broken, sir." Nora said it the way she'd said everything in that room for 4 days quietly, without performance. "It's responding to us, to what we're feeling. If we fire the array, we won't stabilize it. We'll make it worse." The room did not go silent so much as it compressed. Every person at the table seemed to reduce slightly in volume and movement, the way air changes before a crack of thunder. Denton turned from the display and looked at Nora with the full weight of his attention for the first time since she had arrived. "Explain that," he said. The two words were not a question. They were a controlled detonation, carefully aimed. The storm patterns match emotional states, Nora said, keeping her voice level. The Eastern system has been intensifying for 11 days since the evacuation of the two soldiers with hypothermia. The unit that lost them has been stationed in the Eastern Quadrant since then. The Northern system developed 4 days ago. She paused. The day command authorized the bombardment protocol. The silence in the room changed texture. Chow was looking at Nora with an expression that was equal parts skepticism and attention. Akafor had uncrossed his arms. "You're telling me," Denton said slowly, "that this planet is running a weather system based on how my soldiers feel?" "Yes, sir. And your evidence for this is," he glanced at his tablet, and Nora knew exactly what he was looking at. "Synesthesia. My evidence is 11 days of storm intensification that correlates exactly with the emotional state of the unit in the Eastern Quadrant, sir. The synesthesia is how I perceived it. The correlation is how I can prove it." Rodriguez, Nora thought, briefly and absurdly, of every dismissed expert who had ever been handed a challenge and told to back it up. "You have 24 hours, Denton said. If you cannot demonstrate scientifically, not perceptually, that this planet's atmosphere is emotionally reactive, the array fires at 900 tomorrow." He leaned forward slightly. "And if you're wrong, Captain, I will be writing a very detailed report about how a xenolinguist with a medical footnote delayed a critical operational decision based on a feeling." "Understood, sir," Nora said. She was already thinking about her mother's notebook. Phase 4, the teaching and the proof. She took Akafor and Chow with her because she needed a witness and a scientist, and she trusted both of them in the specific way you trusted people who asked questions instead of making statements. They suited up in full atmospheric gear and walked out onto the plateau at 800, into the gray Valen morning, with the eastern storm visible on the horizon as a dark mass that seemed to absorb light rather than move through it. Nora carried her mother's notebook in the inner pocket of her suit, which was not protocol and which she had done anyway. "Walk me through it," Chow said, her voice careful and scientific in the way that meant she was genuinely open and trying not to show how much. "From the beginning, what are you perceiving and how does it map to the data?" Nora stopped walking and faced the eastern storm. "You know how the atmospheric energy readings spike in irregular intervals? Your team called them anomalous pulses. Every 40 to 70 minutes, Chow confirmed. No predictive pattern we've been able to identify. The intervals match the sleep cycle of a unit under sustained psychological stress," Nora said. 40 to 70 minutes is the average duration of a suppressed grief episode in trauma-adjacent populations. The spike is the moment the feeling breaks through." She paused. "The planet isn't creating those pulses, it's recording them." Chow was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her atmospheric scanner and began taking readings without being asked, which told Nora everything she needed to know about where Chow's instincts were landing. Akafor was looking at the storm. "You've been reading this since you landed," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Since I was on the ramp," Nora said. "The color was wrong for a natural weather system." "The color," he repeated not dismissively, "simply processing. I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're describing something your brain does that the rest of ours don't," he said, "which isn't the same as being wrong." He looked at her. "What do we do?" She told them. They spent 4 hours on the plateau, moving between 3 atmospheric monitoring stations and cross-referencing Nora's perceptual readings against Chow's scanner data. Nora would stand at a station, face the storm, and describe what she felt, the color, the texture, the emotional weight of it, and Chow would record the corresponding atmospheric measurements. By noon, a pattern was visible in the data that had not been visible before, because no one had known what to correlate it against. "The energy signatures match," Chow said. Sitting on a rock outcropping with her scanner in her lap, and her voice very careful and very quiet. Your color descriptions map to distinct atmospheric frequency bands. Violet spectrum perception correlates with the low-frequency pressure waves. The sharp silver you described for the northern system corresponds to high-frequency oscillation. She looked up. This is either the most extraordinary coincidence in the history of atmospheric science, or you are actually reading this planet's emotional archive in real time. It's not a coincidence, Nora said. No, Chow agreed. I don't think it is. Then Nora did the thing that nobody had suggested, and nobody had cleared, and nobody would have approved if she'd asked. She walked toward the eastern storm. Not into the worst of it, but close enough that she could feel it without the suit's insulation filtering the full weight of what the atmosphere was carrying. She stood at the edge of the storm's outer band, where the wind was strong enough to lean against, and the cold was specific and particular rather than general, and she opened her perception fully for the first time since landing. It was enormous. The grief in that storm was not fresh. It was not the sharp, bright grief of new loss. It was the kind that had been carried for a long time without being put down, packed tight and heavy, with the density of something that had been compressed rather than released. She felt it the way she felt her mother's absence on the mornings when she woke up and reached automatically for her phone to call Alina and then remembered. That specific weight, that specific color. She raised her right hand, palm out, toward the storm. It was not a scientific gesture. It was not a military one. It was the gesture her mother had always made when she was trying to explain something that didn't have adequate words, a kind of offering, an acknowledgement. The wind dropped. Not completely, not immediately, but measurably, demonstrably, in a way that Chow's scanner recorded and Akafor witnessed, and neither of them said anything about for a long moment afterward. It knows you're listening, Akafor said finally. Yes, Nora said, it does. She turned back toward the base. Now I need to figure out where that grief is coming from. Chow presented the data to Denton at 1600 with the precision of a scientist who had spent a career being careful and was now, for the first time, confident enough to be direct. The correlation between Nora's perceptual readings and the atmospheric frequency data was not ambiguous. The storm patterns over the eastern quadrant matched, with 94% consistency, the documented psychological state of the unit stationed there. The northern system, the one Nora had identified as fear, corresponded to a base-wide increase in stress indicators that the base medical officer confirmed had been escalating since the bombardment authorization. Denton listened. He was very still during the presentation, which Nora had learned to read as his most dangerous mode, not the controlled detonation of the morning briefing, but the stillness of a man processing something that threatened the structure of his understanding. This doesn't explain the Karath silence, he said when Chow finished, or why the planet has been escalating for 11 days. No, Nora said, that's the part I haven't proven yet, but I think I know what it is. She had been thinking about it since she walked back from the storm's edge. The grief in the eastern system was old and compressed. It didn't belong to the unit stationed there, not entirely. It was too large, too dense, too long carried to be 8 months of a single unit's loss. Something else was feeding it, someone else. The Karath Elder appeared at 1800. There was no announcement, no contact attempt from the base communications team. One of the perimeter sensors registered a thermal signature at the base's eastern wall, and by the time Akafor had radioed in the report, the Elder was simply there, standing at the perimeter gate in a form that was roughly humanoid and absolutely still, its surface the same gray as Vaylun's soil, its edges slightly indistinct in the cold air, as if it existed at a frequency that human optics couldn't fully resolve. It had not been seen in 9 weeks. Nora walked to the gate without waiting for Denton's order, which was either the most professionally reckless thing she had done in 14 years of military service or the only correct response to the situation. Akafor followed her without being asked. The Elder did not speak in any language that the translation systems could process. It communicated the way Valen communicated, in atmospheric shifts, in pressure changes, in the kind of environmental language that Nora's mother had spent 20 years trying to convince people was real. Standing 3 meters from it, Nora felt the communication the way she felt everything, as color, as texture, as emotional weight. What she felt from the elder was the same compressed violet grief she had felt in the eastern storm, and beneath it, something older, something that had been in the archive for longer than the human unit had been on the planet. She turned around. Denton had followed them to the gate. "Sir," she said, "the planet has been amplifying something that was already here when we arrived, something that's been here for years." She looked at him carefully. "When did you last serve on Valen, before this posting?" The stillness that came over Denton was different from his processing stillness. It was the stillness of someone who had been found. Nora knew that particular texture. She had seen it in gray and dense and old, in the faces of people who had been carrying something heavy for so long they had stopped noticing the weight. She had seen it in the eastern storm for 4 days. 6 years ago, he said, his voice had changed, not much enough. "I commanded the first survey unit. We were here for 4 months before the Corps pulled us out." A pause. "I lost 2 people on this plateau, equipment failure. The planet was, we didn't understand it then. Nobody understood it." "You've never talked about it," Nora said. "Not an accusation, a recognition." "No. The planet has been holding it," she said. "Everything you felt then, everything the survey unit felt. The archive doesn't release what it's given until the person it came from." She stopped, looked at him. "Sir, I need you to hear what I'm about to say, not as a subordinate to a commanding officer, but as one person to another." Denton looked at her for a long moment. The elder had not moved. The wind above them shifted, and Nora felt the color of it change at the edges, from the deep compressed violet toward something thinner, something with more light in it, something that had the quality of a door slightly open. "The planet is not the threat," she said quietly. "The storm is not the enemy. You have been carrying grief for 6 years that this world has been holding in trust, and it has been waiting for you to come back and do something that soldiers are not trained to do." She held his gaze. "It needs you to feel it, actually feel it, not manage it, not contain it, feel it." Richard Denton, Colonel, U.S. Deep Space Corps, commander of FOB Crestline, stood at the perimeter gate of a gray alien world in the gathering dark, and did not say anything for a very long time. Then something in his face changed. It was not dramatic. It was not the collapse of a man breaking down. It was the quiet, almost invisible shift of someone finally putting down something that had been cutting into their hands for years. His eyes did not fill with tears. His expression did not crumble. He simply exhaled, slowly and completely, in the way Nora had described to Rodriguez's ghost in her memory, a natural respiratory pause, the body finally allowed to stop holding. Above them, the eastern storm began to move. Not toward the base, away from it. The pressure system that had been stationary and intensifying for 11 days began, measurably and visibly, to shift. The dark mass on the horizon lightened at its base. The wind at the perimeter gate dropped from a sustained 40 kilometers per hour to something that felt, for the first time since Nora had landed, like ordinary cold. The elder turned and walked back toward the eastern plateau, and did not look back. Chow was reading her scanner at the perimeter wall, and when she looked up, her expression was the specific expression of a scientist watching data do something data is not supposed to do. "The storm nuclei are dissipating," she said, "all 3 of them simultaneously." A pause. "The northern system too." Akafor looked at Nora. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Denton stood at the gate for another moment. Then he turned, and his voice was the voice of a commanding officer again, controlled and directed, but with something different underneath it, a quality of openness that had not been there that morning. "Stand down the array," he said, effective immediately. He looked at Nora. "Good work, Captain." It was not elaborate praise. It was not a ceremony. It was 2 sentences from a man who had just handed the planet something it had been waiting 6 years to return to him. Nora understood. In the particular way she understood things that didn't have adequate words, that it was enough. Phase 6, the transformation epilogue. The Karath Human Atmospheric Accord was signed 14 months later in a temporary structure built on Veyland's northern plateau, in weather that the base's new atmospheric team described in their official report as mild and stable, and that Nora described privately as the color of early morning, that specific pale gold that existed for 20 minutes before full daylight, when everything was still possible. The Accord established a framework for human presence on Veyland that required every person stationed at FOB Crestline to complete a psychological processing protocol before deployment. Not therapy, exactly, though therapy was part of it. A structured process of emotional inventory, a recognition that the planet they were living on was listening, and that what they brought to its surface would become part of its archive, and that they owed it the dignity of bringing something honest. The protocol had been developed collaboratively by Nora, Dr. Chow, and a Karath liaison process that communicated entirely through atmospheric shifts that Nora translated and Chow documented, and the core legal team spent 3 months trying to figure out how to properly cite in an international framework. They managed it, barely. Nora's mother's name appeared in the Accord's foundational documents in the acknowledgement section, which was not standard practice for military treaties, and which Nora had advocated for with the specific, quiet, persistent determination of someone who had learned that the right moment to speak was usually the moment when speaking felt hardest. The core protocol officer who reviewed the final document had written unusual but appropriate in the margin, which Nora thought Alina would have considered high praise from a military bureaucracy. She was not the same person who had stepped off a transport ramp into a gray world and seen bruised violet in the clouds. She was still a xenolinguist with a medical footnote. The footnote had not changed. What had changed was that the footnote was now referenced in 3 published papers, 1 military training manual, and the opening paragraph of the Accord itself, where it was described not as a medical condition, but as an operational capability that had prevented the irreversible destruction of a living archive and the hostile escalation of first contact with an alien civilization. Akafar had put it more simply, sitting across from her in the FOB Crestline mess hall the night after the storm systems cleared, with terrible coffee and the particular ease of 2 people who had stood at the edge of something large together. "You know what I keep thinking about," he said. "What?" Denton's face, when the storm moved. He wrapped both hands around his cup. "I've been in combat 4 times. I've seen people make decisions that change things, but I've never seen someone win a fight by asking a colonel to feel something." Nora smiled. "My mother always said the bravest thing a person could do was feel the truth in front of someone who was afraid of it." Smart woman. She was. The financial reality of her new position was not what she had expected, though it was better. The civilian contractor role that emerged from the Accord's implementation team paid well, and she was no longer living on the salary of a captain whose specialty nobody had previously known what to do with. More than that, she was doing work that felt like the work she had been built for, not assigned to, not defaulted into, but genuinely, specifically suited for in the way that very few people ever found work that matched the particular shape of their mind. She trained the new arrivals to Veyland, stood with them in their first hour on the plateau and watched them feel the planet read them, and explained, with patience she had inherited from a woman who had spent 20 years being patient with people who weren't ready to listen, what the archive was doing and why it mattered. She told them about the Eastern Storm. She told them about Denton, with his permission, because he had decided after Veyland that his grief was no longer something he was willing to let a planet carry on his behalf, and because the story was more useful as a lesson than as a secret. She told them what her mother had told her, That shooting was applied physics and psychology, except what Alina had actually said. The thing Nora heard in her own voice when she taught was that feeling was applied physics and psychology. That the body under pressure had a correct way to behave, and the correct way was not suppression. It was precision, controlled release, the natural respiratory pause before the shot. You should be surprised when it fires, she would tell them, but not because you forced it, because you finally let it happen. 6 months after the accord was signed, Nora returned to Valen for the second time, not as part of a deployment. She requested the posting specifically, which raised eyebrows in the core personnel office, and then did not raise eyebrows, because her name was now in an international treaty, and personnel officers, who dealt with people whose names were in international treaties, had learned to process their paperwork without commentary. She landed in morning light. Real morning light. Valen had a sun, a distant pale one, and on clear days it reached the northern plateau and turned the gray rock to something closer to silver. She stood at the top of the ramp for 3 seconds longer than protocol allowed, exactly as she had the first time. She looked up at the sky. The colors were different. The deep violet was gone. The sharp silver fear was gone. What she saw above Valen's northern plateau on that morning was something she had not expected and had no precise word for, a quality of light that was not quite gold and not quite white, and that felt, against her perception, like the absence of a weight, like a room after a window has been opened, like an exhale that was also a beginning, like relief. She stood there until Akafar's voice came through her earpiece. He had taken the same posting, for reasons he described as professional, and that she understood were also personal, because Valen had a way of making people feel things they had been avoiding, and Akafar had decided he would rather feel them somewhere the planet could hold them for safekeeping. "You're blocking the ramp again," he said. She smiled and moved. Behind her, the sky above Valen held the color of something finally at rest, and in the archive below the gray soil, in whatever structure the Karath had built to hold the weight of human feeling, the record of 11 days of grief and 6 years of silence, and one soldier's decision to speak when speaking was hardest was written in the language of weather, preserved in the careful and indifferent and deeply patient way that all true things eventually were. The ramp retracted, the transport's engines cooled. The planet kept listening,